Okay, so today we are going to discuss about how to deploy machine learning models in applications. So applications in the sense now, basically, I'm going to discuss how to deploy the machine learning models that we have discussed up to now. I mean, the modules that we have discussed and we have conducted up to now. So here I'm going to discuss how to use them and how to actually include them inside web applications and mobile applications, right? So that's what the plan is to, and we have conducted like several like categories of theories under several categories like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. So now we can't always implement them in a Python code, or we can't implement them in a Jupyter notebook. No, we have to somehow deploy it. That means we have to somehow make it as a product, right? So we had like integrate it and integrate it in a web application, integrate it in a mobile application, and somehow we have like whatever the model that we have built, we can always we have to always find a method to make it a product, right? So that's what we are going to discuss under this topic, where we are going to deploy the models that we have integrated, and then how to deploy them in mobile and web application. So basically, we will first go through the deployment of machine learning models, and here we will be discussing about a very important topic called like actually I'm going to discuss about Python backend creation. That means okay, no matter this model is integrated or deployed in a web application, mobile application, but the backend, that means whatever the functionality or whatever the prediction, whatever the machine learning involved code will be written in Python, and it will be written in Python, and that's called the backend. But the thing is, now you can create any kind of a front end, right? So you can create any kind of a front end. That means like it can be a uh, it can be a uh, mobile application, it can be a web application. You can use Android Studio, you can use like React, or you can use HTML, CSS, or you can use anything like a web application or mobile application. The front end can be developed with any kind of a thing. So it can be a mobile application, web application, whatever, right? So you can use anything. But thing is, now we are going to create the backend in Python. So that's the most important thing. That means whatever the predictions or whatever the things that we are going to get, right? So that those things will be done in Python, right? That means the prediction part, machine learning involvement things, and everything that we have like done related to machine learning will be done in the backend, and the backend will be written in Python, right? So you can use any kind of a front end. It can be a mobile application, web application, anything. Using anything, you can create a application. But the backend, as I mentioned earlier, it will be created using Python. And today I'm going to discuss about how to create it. I mean, how the basics of the backend development in Python, right? Uh, so for this, we are using a Python web framework called Flask, right? So Flask is a Python module, right? Normal Python module. So this is a Python module, and this explains basically this is used to create Python, backends in Python, and this is a web framework development module, right? So what is a web framework? Basically, a web framework is a module where it can build web applications, right? Web applications. So Flask is a web application creating tool available for Python, right? So we have some other alternatives as well. So let me show you some other alternatives. Uh, Yeah. Uh, yeah. So yeah, let me show you this. Yeah. So right. So Django, CherryPy, Web2Py, Turbo Gears, Pylons, right? So these are some alternatives. So let me show you another link. Uh, right. Yeah. So Django, CherryPy, Bottle, and Cubic Web, Dash, Flask, right? Hug. So we have lots of Python backend development tools available, but we are focusing on Flask here, right? So we are focusing on Flask and uh, right. So we have some alternatives uh, as well, right? So Django, CherryPy. So those are the uh, alternatives. So this is what I actually wanted to show you. This is what I was searching about. Now these are the like according to the usage. So we have categorization here. So Django is used by 43% and 41 Flask and other uh, web application frameworks as well, right? So this is very important since like now, as I mentioned, whatever the machine learning model, whatever the deep learning model, whatever the thing you have used, right? What you have to like, finally you had somehow convert it to a web application or mobile application, whatever a product kind of a thing, right? So in that case, this is very useful. Now, the main two things are like main two frameworks are Django and Flask, but we are focusing here on Flask. I mean, like Django is good for like a very complex and very large kind of applications, right? But if your application is small, not small, but like with few web pages and few endpoints, then probably you will use Flask. Then it's easy. But uh, if your web application is a very complex one, then probably it is good to use Django. I mean, if you can learn Flask, then it will be quite easy to move to Django or any other web application, right? So if you can learn one of these very well, then it's very easy to move on to another, right? Okay, so right, so right, yeah. So let me come back to the PDF. I mean the note, right? Uh, right. So yeah. So it's it. Now we will see what we can do using class quickly, right? So let me create a yeah, new folder, week 10. Right. So I'm not going to first. I'm not going to like show you how to deploy machine learning models. No. What I'm going to do first is that how I will introduce you to Flask and create a simple web framework, right? I will first introduce you to Flask and create a simple web framework, and later we will move on to the uh, application deployment, right? So keep that in mind. We are not going to directly move on to the web application development for machine learning models. No, I'm going to first like give you the introduction to Flask and create simple web application without any machine learning related thing, right? ඉස්සලාම machine learning වලට කිසිම සම්බන්ධයක් නැති වෙබ්සයිට් එකක් පොඩි සරල වෙබ්සයිට් එකක් හදලා Flask වලින් Python වලින් කොහොමද back end එක හදන්නේ කියලා බලලා ඊට පස්සේ අපිට පුළුවන් machine learning model එකක් deploy කරන හැටි කතා කරන්න, right? Okay, good. Now yeah, so let me go to a code, right? So you have to pip install Flask first, right? Pip install Flask as usual, right? So before using the Flask module, go to Anaconda prompt or whatever the command prompt or whatever the thing you are using, right? So then simply you have to pip install Flask, right? So this is how we are going to install this Flask web framework, right? Okay. Right. Yeah. So then now I want to first get a confirmation. Now, is my voice and the video are clear? Or any issue with the video, the sound, or the communication? Anything? So as I mentioned earlier, you have to first pip install Flask. Then the Flask module will be installed, right? Now, when you are going to move on to the web application development, we can still use the Anaconda, I mean, not the Anaconda, the Jupyter notebook, right? So when you are developing backends, you have to move on to a simpler notepad or whatever, simple text editor or whatever the thing, right? We are going to use a simple web framework, not sorry, development environment or a notepad. So I'm using Sublime Text. Still, we are going to implement Python codes here, right? So now let me go to the yeah, right. So yeah, so one Flask intro. Right. So let me create a simple code and then let me show you how. Right. So first things first, what you have to do, you have to first import the Flask module. Yeah, keep that in mind that you have to save this as a .py file. Right. .py. Right. So from Flask import Flask. Right. From Flask import Flask. Now, actually, this should be F uppercase. Right. So this is basically the constructor kind of the thing. Right. So what you can do now, first I'm going to create the web app or whatever the backend, right? So this is how we are going to create the backend, and you have to pass it like this, right? So this app is the application, right? Now the thing is, when you are developing backends in Flask or whatever Python backends, now that backend could be used with web applications as well as mobile applications, right? So that's the special thing here. Now, it can be a web application or it can be a mobile application, right? But one backend, right? So one backend always, right? So the backend that you are creating here could be used with the web application as well as a mobile application. It's fine, right? Okay, so this is how we are going to create it. Now, we have created a backend, and then we have to add a route, right? App.route. Now we are adding a endpoint to our application. Now this application is our web application or the mobile application. We are adding one endpoint. Now don't think it as we are adding a page. No, no, no. It's not like that. We are not adding a page here, but we are adding a URL kind of thing, or we are adding an endpoint. That's what we are doing here, right? So this is how we are going to indicate the home or the yeah, the home URL, or the, what you call that, the default URL, right? Or the home URL of the website, right? Now, each endpoint that you are going to create, it should have, right, a function, right? So we have to, under each URL or under each endpoint, you have to create a function, right? So now let me, right? And so what I have done, basically, I have added one endpoint. So this means what? Like each endpoint, now we will add several endpoints later, but each endpoint should be included with an function. Now this functions means basically what happens when this URL is called from somewhere, right? So when this URL or when this endpoint is called from a device or whatever the request, right, this function will be called. That's what happens, right? So for this route or for this endpoint, this is the function to be called, right? So then what we have to do now, I have add one endpoint here. You can add several endpoints, but I will only add one endpoint here. So then what you can do is that you can run the application, right? And I'm yeah. So basically, this is what you're going to do now. Running the app, right? So now you can't run this. I mean, you can't actually implement this in. You can't actually implement this in. As I mentioned, where like you can't implement this in Jupyter Notebook in or any other development environment. The thing is, now you have to run this code through the command prompt or the Anaconda prompt, right? So you have to use the command prompt or the Anaconda prompt to run this code, right? So this is how we are going to do that. Now, you have to first go where your code is located. So my code is located here. So I have to move on to there first, right? Sorry. Right. So I'm in the location now. Then Python, you have to then give the name of the Python file, right? So my Python file is this one, right? So I have basically given Python. So I'm going to run this code. So then hit enter, right? So now you can see it says this app is currently being run, right? The app is currently running, right? So in order to view the web app, what you have to do is that you have to copy this URL now. Actually, this is running in your local server, right? The local host to be exact, right? But the thing is now this can be actually with few extra steps you can upload it to a real server. That means you can upload it to a real server and integrate it to a web application where you can access from anywhere. But currently this is only accessed, right? This is only accessed through the local host, right? So keep that thing in mind. So I'm going to copy this URL. So currently this is in the local host. We will then later like discuss how to deploy these things in actual websites, so actual servers, right? So you can see now when this right URL is called, you can see this. Now that means what here, so the home page or whatever the home URL is called, you can see that this is returned, right? So this is returned, right? So now let me add another route as well, right? Like this page one, right? This is the page one. Let's see. Right? Now the other thing is that you had to always keep in your mind that right, you can't add the same, I mean, more than one function in the same name, right? So that's something obvious, right? So what you have to do is like you have to have different names for different endpoints, right? But thing is now what's the common thing I'm following, that I'm using the URL name here, then it will be obviously a different name, right? But you can use any other name, it's fine. But my practice is that I'm using the uh, the URL name as here, but it's not a must, right? So you can use any other name as the function name, it's fine. But as my practice, then I like it's less chances to get confused, right? And another thing, now this is like what you have to do again. If you have done any changes here, right, you have to terminate this and run it again, right? So you have to terminate this and run it again. But other than that, if you are like in the development mode or development stage, what you can do is simply you can add a parameter here called debug true. Then an important thing will happen. Let me show you. If you run this once, right, now this is fine, right? So it works fine. So you can again go back to the website and go here and right, and then let me go to the, sorry, not test one, page one, right? So this is page one. So like now what we can do is that we can update this code live, right? You can update it, right, like this. Make sure that you are going to change the function name as well. And now you can see this server is running, the local server is running. So what you have to do, like just press Ctrl S, right? So then what will happen, you can see detected change in this, right, in the coding, and so it's reloaded. So that means once a modification is done and once you save the code, the server is automatically restarted, right? So that's a important feature, a very useful feature available in Flask, right? So you can do live modifications, you can like do online modifications kind of things. In order to do that, you have to add this parameter when you are running the app, like debug true. Then what, whenever you are going to press the Ctrl S, or whenever you are going to go here and save the file, this will be automatically restarted, right? So that's an important point. Otherwise, if this parameter is not there, what you have to do is you have to terminate the already running server and you have to run it again manually, right? But with this, you can do these modifications, right, online. Now, in order to make it sure, we can go here and see whether it's right. So you can see now the modification is done here, right? Sometimes in Flask, right, due to some internal errors, sometimes this will be like stuck. Then what you have to do is like if you are going to see that this is not loading, please come here and press Control C, so it will be like reloaded, right? Control C. That won't be happen when you are going to implement this really, but in the debug mode, those kind of things can happen. Sometimes the website can, I mean, the server can be it's stuck, right? So then what you have to do is just press Control C, and it will be then we okay, right? Okay, so this is simply a code that we have implemented, right? So I think you have a good understanding about Flask, how we can create web applications. So this is a very simple web application, and I strongly recommend you to go through this tutorials point, like the Flask tutorial available in the tutorial. Now this explains everything from very basics. Now I'm not going to go through everything, but you can follow this tutorial, a very simple and organized tutorial where you can uh, learn these things from very fundamental, right? I mean, you may have a knowledge on backend development, or you may have knowledge in Python and Flask, but otherwise it's also fine. You can go through this tutorial and it will explain everything from very basics, but this is not a advanced tutorial. This is a tutorial for beginner. So if you have the beginner's knowledge and if you have completed this one, then you can move on to an advanced tutorial. But this will help you, like for, I mean, if you are a beginner in this backend development using Flask in Python, I strongly recommend you to go through this. It will explain everything from very basics, right? Okay, so next we will move on to some advanced applications of Flask, right? Let me save a code called to Flask templates, right? Now here you can see, now we just, now what happens when this endpoint is called, this is returned. So that's what we did just, right? That's what we just did. And when this endpoint is called, this is returned. So this is a string kind of a thing. So the string is returned and it's shown in the website, right? Like this. So what I'm going to discuss now is how to like develop front ends and like using HTML, CSS, or whatever the front end development tool you are using, right? PHP or whatever the thing, doesn't matter, right? Anything, right? Any front end development tool you can use, but I'm using HTML here, basic HTML. So in this next code, what I'm going to do is discuss how to load. So I'm always forgetting to add the Py extension. Right. So then, yeah. Here, so yeah. So here I'm going to discuss how to simply load the HTML file, right? So when you are going to attach, or when you are going to include HTML files, template files in your website or in your web applications, make sure that all those HTML files or whatever the front end files should be included inside a folder called templates, right? So this is a necessary thing in Flask, right? So whatever the HTML file you are using inside in your, I mean, in your web application should be included in the templates folder. So this templates folder is considered as the default location or default, default path where Flask is looking for HTML or whatever the front end files, the template files, right? So now what you can do, like we can add a simple HTML file. So I assume that you are familiar with HTML, since I'm not going to cover anything about HTML, just simple HTML, right? So I can write HTML and just hit the tab, right? So this is available in smart tool available in these kind of editors. So HTML and hit the tab. So it will basically give us the structure, right? So then the title I will add Flask tutorial, right? And in the head, I'm going to add the header one. Yeah, so let me add the head one. Right. So in the body, let me add some paragraph kind of a thing. So this is not too right. So don't think that I'm discussing HTML here. No, I'm not going to discuss HTML. What I'm doing here is basically right, show you how to load these kind of template files into your Flask code or the web application, right? Okay, so I basically add the title and header, right? And let me add the header 2 here as well. Right, so now note that this file is saved here inside the templates folder. So then what you can do here in your Python code, now let's assume that we want to load that HTML file when our home URL or the home endpoint, the default endpoint is called. What you have to do, you have to get another method from the Flask module called render template, and what you can do is basically return the template using the render template function. And what you have to give here is the file name. Now note that, as I mentioned earlier, that the Flask is going to assume that all the front-end files are loaded, saved in the templates folder. So it's going to consider the templates folder as the origin, right? So when you are going to like when you are asked to load the, when we are asked to load the index.html, so it's going to look here in the templates folder. You can use any kind of a folder or whatever the thing inside this, right? You can include this inside this, and then what you have to do the modification here like this. Then new folder like this, right? But what I'm trying to explain is that this template folder will be considered as the default location where the template files are saved, right? So that's it. Now we have done this, and then probably what we can do, you have to add the run and debug true, right? So then this will basically do everything, right? So shall we now this is in the last code. Now let me run the second code, right? So this is the newly updated code, right? And if you run this and let me go here and go to this home page and see, yeah, so this is what happens, right? So now our HTML is loaded here. All right, we are going to use the HTML. HTML file is loaded here. So you can add CSS files and other stuffs here, right? And note that all the CSS files, all the JavaScript files, or the jQuery files, if you are going to add them like CSS CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery files, then those should be included in a folder called static, right? Whatever the static files you are going to use in this code should be like, now this is the main code. This is where your main code is located, the backend located, the Python backend is located. And here the front end files like HTML files should be included in a folder inside folder called templates, and the static files like CSS files, JavaScript files, JS files, then those should be included inside this static folder, right? So that's a must in Flask. Okay, right? Okay, now what I'm doing here, what I'm trying to do here is that I'm step by step, I'm going to show you how to actually, I'm step by step coming to a web application where machine learning model is involved, right? So I'm just trying to give you some basic stuff using in Flask, and gather some important points. Then we will be then we will be ready to develop a simple machine learning model, right? So I'm just explaining you few important points, right? So okay, so here I have a data set. I have a data set, the cardio data set, right? So we have done this earlier, like predicting the risk of having a heart disease, right? So predicting the risk of having heart disease. So if I go to the original data set, this is the data set, and we have solved this using linear regression. So gender, age, total cholesterol, HDL, smoke, blood pressure, medication, diabetics, positive or diabetics positive or negative, that means diabetic patient or not, and the risk, right? So these are the features and this is the target. So we trained a simple regression model for this, and this is it, right? So I'm going to get it, and finally I'm going to save the model as a SAV model. Now this is the most important point in this one, right? So what we can do is that we can take that this SAV file, right? So let me take it here, and right, so here, right? So then what I'm going to do is basically create a similar application like this, right? Where we can get the the gender, age, total cholesterol, and these things, right? Using this kind of a form, right? So you know how to do that. Simply we have done a similar thing earlier. Yeah, so let me get that. Right. So this kind of HTML file I'm going to create, and that will be saved in the templates, patient details, right? So yeah, so I will explain. This is same like the earlier case. අර කලින් එක වගේමයි. මම පෙන්නන්නම් අපි දැන් හදමු අපේ backend එක. So I will save it as the for heart risk level predictor, heart risk level predictor. Right. So we have a get results method. So let me yeah. Right. So finally, app.run. Okay. Now, yeah, get results, and the HTML file will be patient details. So it should be patient details. Now, the file that I just created, patient details. So let me run this and show you. Right. Uh, patient details is not there, isn't it? What happens? Patient details. Is it a spelling mistake? Yeah, yeah. Anyway, let me restart it again and run it. Yeah. So this is what, right? Name, gender, age, TC, HDL, those kind of things, those parameters are taken from the user, right? Using අහනවා අර parameters ටික. ඊට පස්සේ දැන් අපි ඒ ටික ගන්න ඕනේ පිළිවෙලට මෙතනට. Right? So if we go back to this one, the patient details one. So these are the things, right? Age, TCL, SBP, smoke, and we have to take those things here, right? And so you can simply take it like this. Right. So I'm taking whatever that form details into result, and from that I'm going to extract the name, age, gender, and those parameters like this, right? So these are just, I'm calling this key, right? And taking those values to these variables. And I'm creating this array, right? Called test data. And then we have to import the joblib module, and model equals joblib.load, joblib.load, and I have to give that SAV file name, heart risk level SAV. Right. Right. So then we have to get the result here. Result equal model.predict, simply model.predict, and we have to pass this test data, right? And get the zero index. Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway, zero index. Yeah. So let me return the string version first. Let me return the string version of the result and see. Right. Right. So I'm just like creating a test data array from this, and I'm passing it to the model and get the prediction and returning the result. Right. So shall we pass some values and see whether we are at least getting a prediction? Yeah, cannot convert the float 64 to use. Anyway, let me print the result and see what we are getting here. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 features. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 only here in the data set. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what's not there? Age, TC, HTL, SBP is not there in this data set. I don't know why exactly, but SBP is not there in the data set. Anyway, so we have to then remove that. That means the data set is trained without that. I don't know what's the reason, but anyway, it's not there. Anyway, see. Yeah, we are getting the result like the 0.16. Yeah, anyway, now yeah, we have to get the value here, and then without returning it like this, what I can do is just return it by like this. As a dictionary, right? So let me take it as a prediction. So I'm going to get the prediction and I'm going to convert it, not exactly, yeah. So I'm going to round it for 2 decimal places and return it to results.html, right? So the results.html will be something like this. Let me like patient result, patient result, patient results. Okay. So then this is the patient result. Like the earlier case, we are getting the name and the risk level, right? Name and the risk level. So here we have to call the patient result. And for that, we are passing the dictionary with the name and the risk, which is round off to 2 decimal places. So now shall we, yeah. So it says John risk level is this, right? Okay. So very simple, but now we have a machine learning involvement here, right? So what happens basically, these values are taken from the form and those values are taken into, can you see now once the submit button is pressed. So this is similar to the example that we discussed earlier, like the average and the grade calculation, but here it involves a machine learning task, right? Now what happens here is that this is going to take the whatever the things that we are going to submit will be taken, and they will be taken into this result dictionary, and from the dictionary we can extract the values from the by giving the key, and key is basically what is indicated in this name parameter. Name එක තමයි key එක කියන්නේ. ඒතර ඕක key එක call කරලා අපිට values ටික ගන්න පුළුවන්. Keep that thing in mind that you have to numerical values you have to always convert it to float or integer appropriately. Then after taking those things, I'm creating a test data by combining these values, and note that it should be like 2-dimensional. So we have to reshape it to column vector, right? So we have to reshape it to column vector. Now you can see machine learning models like the scikit-learn machine learning models, they are expecting always 2-dimensional for prediction as well. So we have to at least convert it. I mean, we have only one prediction, but we have to pass it like a column vector. You know these things. We have discussed these things in the prior weeks, right? And we have convert to a column vector and pass it to the model, and the prediction, then the prediction, you also know that it's coming as a 2-dimensional array, right? Whatever the value, 2-dimensional, since it's always giving the prediction and the input as a 2-dimensional and the output also as a 2-dimensional. So we are going to take the value from that 0 0. That means, you know, right? I mean, make a 0.7t කියලා ඇත්තට මෙන්න මෙහෙම දෙකක් ඇතුලේ අර මොකද 2 dimensional විදිහට මේ output එක දෙන්නේ. උතර 0 0 කිව්වහම මේ value එක තමයි අපි ගන්න. So we are rounding it off to like 2 decimal places and converting it to a result dictionary, and it will be passed as the result to the patient details.html. And in the patient details.html, what we are trying to do, basically get the dictionary and extract the name and the risk with the percentage mark and show it. That's all, right? So very simple application. So I hope you got the idea. Now, this is what I'm going to cover today. And advanced and a bit attractive example will be done on the Wednesday session. So it will be basically an application where we can online, we can write in the website, we can write a handwritten digit and get the prediction online, right? So that will be done like image-based machine learning model deployed using Flask. So that will be for we use JavaScript as well. Now that will be the Wednesday session, practical session. And the other thing is, please go through the video. So I will upload it, and so you can have a look on that. And the other thing is, if you have any questions, you can ask regarding this or the reinforcement learning section. So the video is already in there, right? And yeah, so please go through the video and implement. I will upload the codes as well. Now there was an issue in the website. I will check it again and let you know. And once it's fixed. Right. So yeah. So this is how we are going to create backend. And the thing is, now I will introduce you to the like how to deploy this in a real web application, how to upload it to a real server, paid server, right? So I will explain it on the next week as well. Probably we can upload it in a real server free, since this won't take that much of a performance, so we can upload it to a free server. And let's see how we can deploy it in a real server on next week. And also we will do that the handwritten digit recognition application as well, right? So today we discuss about the Flask backend, Python backend development using Flask. Once you can create a backend like this, now the important about this backend is that this can be used as a backend for any kind of application, web application, mobile application, written in Android Studio or written in HTML frontend and like React Native, anything, right? So this is the Python backend, right? So sometimes you can have multiple backends, like if you want to have databases and if you want to have like another backend for the web mobile application, then you can have separate backend. For the machine learning part, you can have a separate backend, right? So that's always possible. So we will discuss about these things in detail. Now, yeah, so please go through this and try to implement it your own. And we have done several examples. So what you can do is you can create that kind of application. This kind of application for the applications we have discussed in previous weeks as well, right? Okay, so any questions from the section we covered, or any questions you may have? Model file in Android app. Okay, so Inuj, what you have to do is basically, yeah. So if you are doing it in this method, what you have to do is basically, yeah, the same method. Now you have to call this backend in from your Android Studio. Whatever the endpoint you have to call here, and the thing is, now you have to then upload it to a separate server, right? So this backend should be in a separate server. So from your mobile, from the application, you can call this endpoint, right? You can call this endpoint. This will be like separate. This will be changed when you are dealing with the real server, right? So anyway, you have to call that endpoint and get the result. Yeah, I will explain that when we are going to develop a real, deploy a real web into this kind of application into real server, then you will understand actually. Anyway, this is the backend. You can call it from the Android or whatever the method. And actually, when you are going to create mobile applications, the other thing is you can, without a Python backend, you can develop the machine learning models in like a standalone applications in Java, Android Studio, React Native, but not for the machine learning models. So that can be done for deep learning models like neural network model. Like we have like TensorFlow Lite, we have TensorFlow JS versions. So we can integrate them directly in mobile application. කෙලින්ම mobile application ඇතුලේ machine learning, deep learning use කරන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි machine learning වලට එහෙම specific ඒවා නැහැ. machine learning applications use කරනවා මේක තමයි තියෙන method එක. ඔයාලට මේක කොහේ හරි server එක run කරන්න local එකේ බෑ. මොකද local එකේ දැම්මොත් එහෙම app එකක් වැඩ කරන්නේ නැහැනේ. මේ කොහේ හරි upload කරන්න වෙනවා. upload කරලා ඒ server එකට ඔයාගේ app එකෙන් හැම වෙලේම endpoint එකට call කරන්න වෙනවා මේ server එකේ. එතකොට server එකට අපි මේ වගේ details යවලා prediction එක ආපහු ගෙන්න ගන්න ඕනේ app එකට. That should be done online, cannot be done offline. Yes, I will. Actually, I will show you how to deploy this kind of a model in a real server. Then you will understand. Uh, okay.